This is a podcast from the Queen City Podcast Network.
Hope. Sometimes we need help finding it. And sometimes that help comes in the form of stories of people who've lost it and found it yet again. That's why we're here. Welcome to Hope with Ramona Holloway. Welcome to Hope. I'm Ramona Holloway, and today we are talking with a man who some say was the most controversial DJ on the air in the late 80s and early 90s here in Charlotte. Was he just having fun? Was there an agenda? Was he experiencing some mental illness at the time? We're going to hear his story today. His name is Chuck Boozer, and we welcome him today to Hope with Ramona Holloway. Chuck Boozer, welcome to Hope.
Hello, Ramona Holloway.
I have to say thank you, first of all.
You're welcome.
When I was laid off, you were one of the first people who reached out to me, and we had never even met face to face.
You've been here 25 years in Charlotte?
I came here in 2001.
Yeah. I have known of you. I'd listen to you and Matt all the time. I loved y'all in the afternoons, and then you went to mornings, finally. And I didn't get to hear you there. But I've had a lot of people help me. I've had a lot of people give me a hand up and stuff, and I try to reach out to people when they get bumped and stuff. If anybody knows what it's like to be fired, I think I do. I got bumped a lot of times and stuff. So yeah, I wanted to give you every opportunity to come and get back up. You're a great broadcaster stuff. Word on the street is you didn't get a good shake going out. That's word on the street. But you're a pro and you just kind of keep on going. And I think there's great things ahead for you. I really do believe that. And I just wanted to extend that opportunity to you too. Chuck,
word on the street is that you were a total bad boy.
Was I?
A total bad boy.
Gosh, I don't think so.
And the words online are the most controversial personality.
Really?
On the air at the station we now call K1047.
It was...
Do you think you were controversial?
I really don't. I didn't think I was, it's interesting. I just had
management never said and he never tried to reel you in, nothing?
No. We were, Jerry Buckner was my comedy guy. Jerry was a part of a group called Buckner and Garcia. And Jerry had a song back in 1982 called Pac-Man Fever. Jerry produced the theme to WKRP in Cincinnati, kind of a media guy.
Oh, the old radio TV show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so he wrote a song for Anne Murray. He kind of had some media knowledge. And he called me one day and said, have you ever Googled yourself? And I said, no, why? And he said, you should. There's a lot of stuff. And he said, they said one of the things, the most controversial morning jock ever at 1047. He said, do you think we were? And I said, no. And he said, me neither. We really thought we had you for about, the research and everything showed we had you for about 17, 18 minutes in the mornings on the drive in. And so we took it upon ourselves to try to get you away from whatever was going on in your life. We didn't have an agenda. There was no politics at the time. We weren't pushing anything. There was no message. It was just goofy comedy. Make me laugh. Make me forget about my problems. Honest to gosh.
But the controversial part has got to come from somewhere. Like maybe you offended some people.
Perhaps we did a few things that got carried away.
Such as?
We used to do a bit called the bogus rumor of the day. Bogus means fake or counterfeit. And we would do different things. For instance, whatever was hot, we would call it the bogus rumor of the day is such and such. And we did this thing one time where Piedmont Airlines was still Piedmont. They were something else at the time. What were they after that? U.S. Air. They were U.S. Air. And so they had just gotten a gate to Gatwick. We had gotten the gate from Charlotte to Gatwick nonstop. And so we went on the air that day and said the bogus rumor of the day, first 1,000 people that call U.S. Air will get a free trip to London. Bogus rumor of the day. And I said that every time. Bogus means fake or counterfeit. Evidently, people don't hear you when you say that. About 8:30 that morning, one of the girls came back and said, Chuck, there's a guy that wants to talk to you specifically. And he's from, I don't know where he's from, but he sounds upset. And I went back there during the break at 8:30 and stuff. And I said, hey, and he said, who's this? And I said, Chuck Boozer. He said, what are you doing? I said, I do the morning show here. And he said, answer me this. And I can't Can we cuss here? Because he was mad as
I prefer you not.
He was mad as a hornet, and he laid into me and said, GD, I am trying to run a GD Airlines, and my lines are jammed in Raleigh, Charlotte, and Atlanta. What are you doing down there? And I said, we were just having a little fun. And he was mad. He was mad as a hornet.
When I first started talking about the fact that you reached out to me, because I announced it on my Facebook page, because I like to let people know who's been good to me.
Sure.
And when I said, I'm going to be on the air with Chuck Boozer, a friend of mine said, I think at one point he was going to be sued by the banks because...
We're going to tell that story too. So
he made some type of announcement
bogus rumor
about
of the day.
People taking all of their money out.
Bogus rumor of the day, 1987, October. The stock market went down 500 points on a Monday. It was called Black Monday, 1987. And 500 points back in 87 was a lot. We weren't at 40,000 plus in the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were at 10 or under. And so we went on the air that morning, the next morning, and John Stedman was the president of the bank right across the street. And that was my bank. That was Republic Bank. That's where we banked. That's where I kept my $44 in the savings account. And the window was about that big. And John didn't believe in radio. He didn't believe in the power of radio. And I wasn't being smart, but I thought this would be a chance to show Mr. Stedman the power of radio.
Oh, Lord.
And so I went on the air that morning at 6:05 and we said, bogus rumor of the day. It looks like Republic Bank won't open today due to insufficient funds. But what happened yesterday? A lady calls about 8:20 and says, my daughter works over there. And I said, ma'am, I'm looking right across the street and I don't see anybody in the parking lot at 8:20. You know why at 8:20 there weren't anybody in the parking lot?
Why?
They didn't open until 8:30. People weren't listening to me. So about 9 o'clock, these two guys came in and stood in the lobby and listened to the speakers up in the thing in dark suits. And I thought, this ain't going to be good. And it wasn't. John Stedman was the president of the bank and he was mad. So this was in October of 87. I was on the way to a Roman Gabriel roast up in Raleigh. I was doing the history of his hair. And they called me. And Jake said, how long has it been since you've been arrested? And I said, quite a while, about 81. I think I got a DUI back in 81. I learned pretty quick. And I said, why? He said, I think it's going to happen again. And they arrested me for making...
You were arrested.
They arrested and booked me.
Because of what you said.
Me and Howard Stern have a lot in common.
On the air.
Absolutely. I was arrested for making a false statement against the bank. Here's the deal. You can't yell fire in the bank theater. And I did. And so they arrested me.
Chuck. Perhaps it's me. So you were arrested.
I had to go down
because of what you said on the air, but yet you still sit here and tell me that you don't think you were controversial. How is that?
I don't think I was. I didn't have that agenda. We were just goofy disc jockeys. That's all. I mean,
you were just being goofy?
We were just having fun and stuff. There wasn't, we were just trying to...
Do you not know where the line is?
I don't think it's really controversial. I think it may have been shocking to some people. But I don't.
So would you call yourself a shock jock?
I would not call myself a shock jock. I just had a guy call me a while back that wanted to be on the air with me now. And he's lost his son in Charlotte. And Ed and I have been friends on Facebook since last May. And we went back and forth. And I said, Ed, he started a grief thing. He's probably 55, 60, and he's lost his adult son. And he was grieving about this. And he started a grief program and stuff. And I said, Ed, let's talk about this. Come on WHKY with me and we'll talk about this. And this is a great thing you're doing and stuff. Everybody goes through this. And he waited and he called me and he said, well, I've got some concerns. We've never met. We were just friends on Facebook. And, but I liked his videos and stuff. And I said, okay. And he said, well, you're kind of a shock jock and this is a real touchy subject. And I said, really? Now that would be a compliment if you thought I was a shock jock because I'm not. I mean, I'm a little guy
You've never thought of yourself.
I've never thought of that as, I'm not a big time jock. I'm a jock from Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm a lucky guy that's 70 years old and still working. That's it. I'm not a shock jock. I'm not a genius. There's nothing. I mean, I'm Chuck. I'm Booze.
And Boozer is your real name.
Charles Warren Boozer is my real name. Boozer is my real name. It's on the birth certificate. So, but I said to Ed, I called him back and I said, Ed, did you think I was going to make fun of your dead son? And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, you don't want to come on the show because you think I'm a shock jock. And I said, I don't want you to come on the show if you don't think that. I said, but Ed, I simply wanted to further your cause of the grief for your son. And I said, I'm a little bit hurt that you didn't do your homework, Ed. And it hurts my feelings that you don't think I can be sensitive.
But here's the thing,
this is the problem you run into.
I did my homework on you. And the very first thing that came up was controversial.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of I guess that's maybe the reputation, but I really don't believe that in my heart.
You don't believe it?
I honest to gosh don't, Ramona. I'm looking at you, girl.
I believe you, Charles.
No,
I believe you.
Because that wasn't our mantra. That wasn't what we were trying to do. Jerry and I mean, we did. You know what I'm hearing?
What? Is just an absence of a filter.
You think?
Is the absence of a filter.
Maybe I've gotten old quick. I don't know.
Wow.
Your
brain just works differently.
We used to have people come on the air. Jerry would come on the air and be a guy that had the bill before the legislature. So we did this several times. We were going to ban motor racing in the state of North Carolina. It doesn't prove anything, just goes around waste gas.
Not controversial.
Oh my gosh.
Not in the home of NASCAR. Not controversial.
Oh my
at
gosh.
all.
We did one where we were going to ban professional wrestling. Ric Flair called and wanted to speak to Jerry. And Jerry said, do you think he's coming down here? I said, you think he'll kick your butt if he comes down here? I mean, Rick bought into it also. We did.
I would have paid money for that.
We had a guy named...
I would have paid money
we had a guy named,
to see Ric Flair come down to the station.
I knew Rick. I knew he would come down there. I said, Jerry, we're okay. We had a guy named Bill Hoger, and Bill could do voices and stuff. Bill was a locksmith by profession, but he could do radio voices and stuff. Really good guy. And he came up one time and he had a new sport. It's called cat chasing. And Bill would talk like that country guy, and he said, Chuck, you got to be a skydiver, but what you do is you get yourself a plane, you get you 4 or 5 guys that got parachutes and stuff, you get a bag of cats, about 5 cats, and you go about 10,000 feet, and you let the cats out, and you throw them out the window there, and everybody goes out with the bag, and the one who catches the most cats before they get to the ground wins. Well, we were just kidding about this. The SPAC, the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals called, oh my gosh, we're kidding, folks, we're kidding. It blew up, oh my gosh. We were just having fun. Lindy has told me, my wife has said, you know,
I am seriously flabbergasted. I am like, he can't see it, y'all. He's serious. He can't see it.
Well,
I'm glad you brought up your wife.
Is it controversial?
There have been times that we have talked, and I've said, Chuck, I'm on your wife's side.
Yes, I know.
I'm on your wife's side, and you see things completely differently. Do you think that your brain works differently than other brains?
I do not.
Sometimes you have had moments in your life where your brain was broken. You felt like your brain was like,
I did.
Discombobulated.
I sure did.
How did you know that things weren't right?
I was full-blown manic depressive. I've been hospitalized back in 81. I went to Georgia Mental Health Institute, and I was in there for a week. When Jimmy Carter took over as president, Georgia was last in mental health facilities across the nation, and Jimmy Carter brought them to second. So they built the Georgia Mental Health Institute, had 4 wings, and they had catacombs underneath. You could go down underneath and everything. It was really a facility, really nice. And things were slipping on me. I had gotten a job, and I was sleeping about 3 hours a night. I wasn't doing any drugs, but I was sleeping about 3 hours a night, and I was functioning on 3 hours a night. And that's called manic high. And I didn't know what it was. And so I went to my preacher, went to my mother, went to my preacher. We went over and saw Jim Clifford at Oglethorpe Church. And he sat and talked with us for a second. He said, let's go next door to Oglethorpe University, the medical facility, and see Dr. Kerman. And saw Dr. Edwin Kerman. And Dr. Kerman was a nice little Jewish man, a little portly guy, and he smoked cigarettes until the ashes were about that long in the room with you and stuff. And he sat and talked to me, just like we're talking. And he said, do you know who Tony Orlando is? And I said, I do. And he diagnosed me in about 10 minutes. And he said, Tony is on lithium. After Freddie Prinze killed himself, Tony wanted to quit show business and had a mental breakdown. And we have Tony on lithium. And he said, it will make you a productive person in society. And it did. And so when you're in a manic high, you have rushing thoughts. You're spinning your wheels, and you really can't get stuff accomplished a lot of times because it's one thought after another, boom, boom, boom. And I was textbook manic high. If you look in there are delusions of grandeur, spending money you don't have, thinking you're going to save the world. That was Chucky Boy. Check, 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 all 3 of them. I bought Lindy a car when she was 18. I put $60 down on a 260Z, and I was going to buy her that for her 18th birthday. I was working part-time, making about $100 a week. I don't know how I was going to do it, but delusions of grandeur. So I went in to we went over there and I checked in, and I was an inpatient for about a week at Georgia Mental Health. I did call the radio station. Well, we went to see the general manager. The general manager was Jerry Blum, greatest general manager ever worked. My mother and I. And Cliff,
Your mom went with you?
Well, she went with me to the
work?
radio station and to tell them I needed to go to the mental place, and I went with my preacher. And we went in the office of Jerry Blum. Jerry probably made $500,000 a year, wore big chunk jewelry, nice Jewish man. Jerry was the greatest general manager ever. Really, he cared about us. Jerry was called the big guy. If you remember in WKRP in Cincinnati, they called Mr. Carlson the big guy.
Mm-hmm.
That was after Jerry Blum.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that wrote WKRP was a friend of Jerry's and roamed our radio station. Hugh Wilson was the creator of KRP, so he was in the station from time to time. But we went in and sat down with Jim Clifford, my preacher, and my mother, and sat with Jerry on the other side of the desk and told him what we had planned to do. And we wanted to go over and get me started on some type of medication to try to bring me back and make me a productive person in society.
Mm-hmm.
And Jerry sat there and said, well, you know, you break your leg, you get your leg fixed. He said, you break your head, you get your head fixed. He said, go get your head fixed and you got a job when you get back. Mm. So I did. And it was a typical state-run institution.
So your preacher reached out to your Jewish boss.
He did.
And they agreed.
They did.
That Chuck needed some help.
They did. And my mother was there too. And so we went into Georgia Mental Health Institute, and my only reference to a mental institution was Here's Johnny, was Jack Nicholson and the Cuckoo's Nest.
It had a very dark ending.
I had seen Cuckoo's Nest. Yes, it did.
It was very dark.
Yes, it did.
Was that a dark time in your life?
It was. It really was. So here I go in at 20, 21 years old, and they leave you there at night. And now there were people in there that had stitches in their wrist and stuff. People tried to kill themselves. I don't think I was really going to try to kill myself, but I probably needed to be an outpatient with outpatient facilities and things like this. So we were there 3 days, and just like in the movie, I went and organized a softball game. Guy was out in the outfield on Thorazone, almost killed him, you know. And I was there 3 days, and I read by one of the payphones, we didn't have cell phones back then in 81, that if you feel like your rights have been violated, call this number. And I called that number and said, they never read me my rights. And they said, you've been violated. So the next day, I got called into the main area with all the doctors and the head doctor. He had been contacted by this place and said they didn't read me my rights. He was not happy with Chucky Boy, and he didn't care who Chucky Boy was. So he sat me in the middle of the room and talked to me and asked me questions, and he was PO'd. And he said, Mr. Boozer, you seem to be looking at your watch a lot. He said, have you got someplace to go, or do we need to let you go so you can go somewhere or something like that? And I looked at him, I looked around, I got all these nurses and doctors and everything, and I said, you know, I went over to Citizens Jewelry over at Northlake before I came in here last week. I said, I just bought this thing. I paid $115 for it. I really like looking at it. And there was a snicker around the room. That didn't make him any happier. That was close to the end of the meeting and stuff. It was a typical state-run institution. I think I left on Friday night and went back. You could go back if you left. And I had Lindy with me, so she was the witness and stuff. And they had started me on lithium, which is a psychiatric drug. And when I got home, my mother said, I see a change in you. It was a screen that had come down and it brought you back down. And then we went back on Sunday night, and the nurse that was at the check-in counter said, well, people who leave here don't need help. You left. You must be cured. And I said, hang on just a second. I said, Lindy, can you come over here? Would you say that again? And she did. And I said, we're not staying. I said, good seeing you. Take care. And I went right back to my folks' house. But I needed to be an outpatient. But it was a typical state-run institution. In other words, these people were employed by the state. It was a mental institution. One night, they turned the TV off at 10:30 in the TV room and said, you got to go to bed. I wasn't ready to go to bed. And I made a stand.
You took a stand at the mental institution against the TV going off at 10:30?
Don't do that. So I went back to my room, and these two big black gentlemen came back and proceeded to take off their belts and their wallets and their watch. And I don't know what they were going to do, but they were going to hook me up to Georgia Power or something.
This is honestly sounding like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
That's the only
was
thing I
that
had.
movie based on you?
Well, no, but that was, when was that, 75? This was 81, so this is about 6 years later. I had seen the movie in Scottsdale. I was living in Atlanta now. So I had a feeling they were going to rough me up a little bit there to get me to comply and stuff like that. And I looked at them and I said, what do y'all need me to do? And they said, we need you to go to bed. And I said, if I go to bed, are we cool? And they said, yeah. And I said, good night. I'm out. So talk my way into it, talk my way out of it. I guess a good experience. I don't know. That was my reference to a mental health institution. if you're having some
You
problems,
haven't had to be institutionalized since, right?
No. And I probably really didn't need to be institutionalized then. I probably should have been an outpatient and seen somebody. I got with a guy in Charlotte years ago. No, not Bazzani. And he was a great meds guy. He knew his meds. And in one of the meetings, in one of our sessions, he called me caustic. You know what caustic means?
Yeah.
I didn't. I had to go home and look it up.
What does caustic mean to you?
It means beyond sarcastic, which is actually, in my world, that's a compliment. But I felt...
Still not a shock jock, still not controversial, just a little caustic.
Just a little caustic. Do you think I'm crazy because I don't think I'm a shock jock?
No, I don't think that you're crazy. I think that your brain works differently.
Do
I
you?
think something that I might find controversial, like even as you speak and say, well, there were two, and then in came two big black guys. And I'm like, well, why is black guys important there?
Could be two white. Could be two white guys.
Right, but
I'm not offended by that.
I
hope you're not.
know. I'm not because I understand that your brain works differently than mine.
If you could have seen these two black guys, you would have thought those are two rather large black guys, and they had the belts on and they were taking everything off, and I remember it quite well. It was not two big white guys; it was two big black guys. If you know what I mean.
So I say that to say, we don't always see ourselves the way other people see us,
Right?
And you obviously just kind of go out there and you're just wide open.
Probably. I'm probably an open book. I'm probably more than I should be. When Robin Williams took his life, I called Hancock and was going to talk about my mental challenges and stuff. And he said, let's not, Booze. He said, you don't want to lead with that.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that from John, but I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
I have spoken.
Do you still take medication?
I don't. I take, anything I take, I had a heart situation last year and I take a little bit of heart medicine, one little pill in the morning for cholesterol, I think. But I'm pretty lucky. I'll be 70 in May. In 2 months, I'll be 70. So
what changed up here?
I don't know. I think age. I think you age with it and stuff. There were times, Ramona, when I first was wound back in my 20s, I was taking probably 15, 16 pills a day. I mean, I was taking lithium and Depakote. And that's a lot of powder going into your body. But at that time, I had a chemical imbalance in my brain. That's what they told me I did. Don't know what it was sparked of. I was married when I was 19 and Marilyn was 20. We were married December the 27th, 1975. And on March the 15th of 1976, Marilyn was coming home in Scottsdale, Arizona to our condo and she got hit by a cement truck and died instantly. She was 20 and I was 19. We were married 84 days. And they called me on that Friday afternoon and said, are you Chuck Boozer? And I said, yes. And they said, do you have a wife named Marilyn? And I said, yeah. And they said, she's been in an accident. You need to come to the hospital. And I said, is she okay? And they said, come to the hospital. She's in an emergency. So at 19 years of age, by myself, I went to the hospital at Scottsdale Memorial Hospital and went in the front door and they route you to the back. And when I told them who I was, they routed me into a room that was paneled and had a couch. And a nurse and a doctor stepped in and said, Mr. Boozer, I'm sorry to tell you, your wife was in an accident this afternoon. She didn't make it. And I lost it. I was 19 years old and I was with 3 strangers and my wife was dead that I had just declared my love for in front of a crowd,
Trauma.
Oh boy. And then I got myself together and they said, you got to go, can you identify her? Mm. And so, and Marilyn was a beautiful woman. She was a gorgeous girl, a year older than me. And so I did. I said, do I have to touch her? And they said, no. And I said, I don't want to touch her dead. And then we went back and they pulled the sheet back. So Cecil Clemens was driving the cement truck, 63-year-old guy. It was a 20-ton cement truck, 1:30 in the afternoon, his last load for the afternoon. When Marilyn came off the Pima Indian Reservation, she could see 30 miles that way and 30 miles that way. So she missed the light. She was messing with the dog and he plowed into her. And it was the breakage of the cervical spine. He broke her neck. He hit her right behind the driver's door in a 67 Tempest, which is the same body style as a GTO, big car. Mm-hmm. And it hit the car, hit her so hard, it broke her neck and spun the car and hit her in the ditch about 2:30 on the afternoon on March 15th, Ides of March. And I remember driving home from the hospital thinking, here we go again. And I felt well, here I was, I had found my girl and here we go again. I'm going to start all over. Mm-hmm. And I felt like somebody had just taken a rug and just jerked it out from under me. Mm-hmm. And so I stayed in Phoenix as long as I could. And I kept running into people because I'd gone to college there, Mesa Community and DeKalb, and Mesa Community in Scottsdale. And I kept running into people a year later that said, Chuck, we just heard. God, we're so sorry. And that just kept perpetuating it. And one day my sister called. My sister lived there. I only have one sister, Carol. And she said, how you doing? And I said, I think I'm going to kill myself this afternoon. And I don't think I was going to do that, but I was pretty depressed. I was pretty sad, and if you've ever been in that depression and stuff, you don't know why you are, but you're just sad and you just no energy, no nothing. You just, and about
robbed of hope.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And about 2 days later, there was a knock at the door. My mother lived in Atlanta and I was in Tempe, Arizona, and it was my mother. And I said, what are you doing here? And she said, I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd stop in.
Typical mama.
And so she came in and within about 10 minutes, she said, well, here's the deal. Carol's called us and your dad and I want to make you an offer. And we want to offer for you to come and live with us in Atlanta and start over and give you a fresh start. And we packed up a half a load and I rode with her in my 74 Volkswagen and I was pissed. I was mad. I did not want to leave Phoenix. I thought that was failing. I wanted to continue on. I was trying to be a disc jockey there and be in the media. And I couldn't I was just going through the motions. I was literally just going through the motions of life. I was terrible on the air, just doing time and temp and just didn't give about anything. And I didn't speak we rode in that Volkswagen, that 74 Volkswagen, which is pretty close next to each other. I didn't speak to her till Texarkana. Look on the map. That's about 2 days. I was mad. But that's
you think that was grief?
That's a good question, Ramona. Probably. Yeah. So, but I got a new start and I had the opportunity for people to know or not know. And so I'm very thankful to my mom and dad for that reset. And I've told my dad that and he said, really? And I said, gosh, yes, Dad, thank you. You gave me a whole start over. And then I called the radio station one day and I got hired at WQXI AM. I mean, just boom, boom, boom. Legendary radio station. And when I stepped up there, the level of professionalism went through the roof. We did it one way at WQXI 94Q in Atlanta. You know which way that was?
What way?
The right way.
Is that Chuck Boozer's way?
It is now. So I learned habits, and we were in a situation there where you had people who wanted to mentor you. The morning guy was making $600,000 a year. He drove a Ferrari to work. Gary McKee, great morning guy, great disc jockey. But Gary was for real, and he didn't play. So when they showed me how to do production and stuff, Kevin O'Connell took me back. Kevin later became the voice of Ford. You're a Carolina Ford dealer. That was Kevin for years. And when he left to go do that, he showed me how to do production. And we stacked up the carts, if you remember carts and everything. Yeah. And he stacked them up right here. And he said, okay, now we're going to put all those in the machines and play them back through to make sure they're queued up. And he said, you know why? And I said, no. And he said, your initials are on that cart. And if that goes into the morning show and McKee plays it and it misfires, he'll give you a free one. And the next one, you won't be here. And he said, they will fire you. And I'm not kidding. And I said, got it. So I have habits that I do that I started back in 1981. And I was started in 73. I started going on the air in 73 in Phoenix. I worked for Cool FM in Phoenix. It was owned by Tom Chauncey and Gene Autry, the singing cowboy.
So Phoenix,
Atlanta, Myrtle Beach, Dallas, Texas, Cincinnati, Myrtle Beach, Charlotte, Myrtle Beach, a couple times in Myrtle Beach, and then back here to Hickory, and I'm on WHKY in Hickory.
What's your most memorable moment in radio? Or maybe you haven't had it yet.
I've had a bunch of good moments. I've interviewed George Shin, Rick Hendrick, Curly Neal from the Globetrotters, Jane Kennedy, Rosie O'Donnell. Rosie liked me. I made Rosie sound good, and she liked me, and I liked her at the time. Well, she's got a little carried away. She doesn't know I'm controversial. But I've had so many great moments to be on the air. To get released from jail, to be released on my own recognizance.
You were only arrested because of something you did on the air once, right?
Right. Yeah. There was a guy, not a black guy or white guy, just a guy that was chained to the round table when I went in to be booked down in downtown Charlotte at the police station, the intake center. And he said, what are you in for? He was chained to the thing. And I looked at him and I thought, oh gosh, I got to come up with something. And I said some things I shouldn't have. And I broke some radio antennas in the parking lot. I said, what are you in for? He said, strong arm robbery. I said, how much? He said, $186. And I thought, okay. And you don't remember this. Do you remember Sheriff Kidd?
No.
Sheriff Kidd was a big old country boy. Sheriff Kidd talked like this. He came in. He knew me. I knew Sheriff Kidd. He came in, he looked at the deputy, he said, "What's he in here for?" He was mad. He didn't think I should have been arrested. And the deputy read him the code or whatever, and he said, "Get him booked and get his ass out of here as quick as he damn can. I'll tell you what, we've got people in here who've actually committed crimes." He was mad. He didn't think that was they were going to make an example of me at the time. Peter Gilchrist was the assistant.
Do you feel you deserved it?
Peter Gilchrist was the assistant district attorney at the time, and he said there was no malice. And so there is now a law on the books called the Boozer Act, and says if you're going to make a statement, you must have malice intended. And I didn't have any malice intended.
You have your own Boozer Act?
I do have a law.
I did not know
I do have
that.
a law named after. I'm really a special guy.
That's crazy.
It is. You can look it up. And so, but there wasn't any malice intended. So they dropped the charges and stuff. John Stedman never spoke to us from the bank. Every time we went in, Lenny and I went in, they would card us. And I finally got the idea and I said, okay. And we left the bank and stuff like that. They never would take our apology. We were the lead story for a long time. I remember they had all the jocks in town.
There are quite a few people in this area who have not forgotten. That was a big deal.
Yeah. That was, they had everybody on radio. I mean, they had everybody in radio on TV on Channel 3. And I sat home and had a cocktail on Monday night and watched everybody run Chuck into the ground. Oh my God. I had gone too far.
Did you ever hold any grudges?
No, God, no. Listen, I sat home that night.
Because who came after you?
Nobody came after me. I sat home that night and I thought, all you fat, ugly radio people are on TV tonight because of me. And I did it first. I thought of it first. My God, you're on radio for a reason. You got the perfect face for radio. Come on. You know.
Wow.
And they all took shots at me. That's okay. That's, I stepped over the line. I went too far. But when you do that, when you're trying to do that, you have that possibility of stepping over the line. Yeah. Spoke one night on mental health. Spoke at the Mental Health Association's annual banquet, all doctors, at the Mint Museum. I was the lead speaker. I was the keynote speaker, and I went in dressed
Controversial.
up. Oh my God!
At the Mint.
I went in and I thanked everybody for being there and stuff, and I said to all the doctors, and I said, I've probably spent a lot of money keeping all you guys in your nice suits and everything else and nice cars and stuff. And tonight, I'm getting paid for this. I'm getting some of it back. And we told the story. And David Haynes on the way out.
Which story did you tell?
I told the mental health story. I told what I'd been doing and the whole Georgia, the whole thing like that.
Yeah.
And they all applauded and stuff, I remember I spoke in Hickory one night and I got up and I said, "My name is Chuck Boozer and I'm a manic depressive." And they stood up and applauded me right there. I thought, I'm done. I'm out of here. Let's go. Can't do any better than that.
Do you feel that has maybe been part of your superpower all these years?
I think if you look at some of the people who have histories of manic depression, Abraham Lincoln was probably manic depressive. He wore black. They said the candle was burning many a nights in the Capitol building with President Lincoln. Very dark. Tall, all black all the time. Obviously, Roosevelt, bully, was a manic depressive. Patty Duke was a manic depressive. Patty would come off lithium to go into a role and then go back. That's rough on you to do that. I think some people use it because you have a burst of energy when you go into a manic. I think people can use that sometimes and for a creative outlet and stuff like that. You have to be careful. You remember the golfer? There was a golfer who stood on his golf bag in the airport and preached. He was having a manic high. I'm trying to think who that was. I went into a McDonald's one time on Buford Highway, and I was manicked. I was in a manic high, and I directed the people from the counter, "Hey, get over there and work the French fries." Pretty crazy. Pretty
were
crazy.
Directing the people on the other side of the counter?
And people were like,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
If that was now, you would totally have gone viral.
Oh, gosh. Thank God. Yeah. So, but, I'm okay. I'm okay with who Chuck is. I don't have any, I have regrets. I would do things differently and stuff, but I'm okay. I'm okay with Chuck. What people don't tell you when you get to this age, the golden years, is I think everything that's golden to you, you get to say goodbye to. Because you lose your parents. My dad's 94. My mom died about 4 years ago. She was 89 and a half, both good runs. I listened to your mom and you all the time, Wheezy on the air. My God, that was a hilarious bit with her. She was funny. She was really funny.
She was.
And I know that was your buddy. That was your friend too.
Yeah.
And I know you took great care of her and stuff. So you get to do things like this. I'm a grandfather now. I have a grandson, pretty fresh. He's pretty raw. And he's a boozer all the way, boy, I'll tell you. His name is Trey Antheus.
Look out, Charlotte.
So his name is Trey Antheus Boozer.
There's another boozer out there.
Another boozer coming and stuff. So, but I've had a great life. I look back at some of the stuff I've gotten to do. I mean, I'm a fan. They would always tell me, we had Billy Joel coming to the station. They said, Chuck, don't ask Billy Joel for his autograph. I got him in the studio. I said, would you sign this, please? I mean, Lionel Richie, would you sign this, please? I mean, you get one shot for heaven's sakes. Rip Taylor came in and Chuck Boozer, where'd you get that name? Ha ha. I use that drop all the time. I've had a great run. I hope it's not over.
I don't think it is.
I
want to thank you for when I lost my radio job, being one of those radio people who sought me out to say, how can I help and support you? Because so many people in the industry do define themselves by
their jobs,
their show,
yeah.
by their job.
Yeah.
And the hand of friendship that you extended was important.
Well, I mean it.
And it's something
from my heart.
that we can all, there are a lot of people losing their jobs right now.
Yes.
And I hope the people who've already been there do exactly what you did, which is reach out.
Yeah. I think if you're out there and you've lost a job, no matter what you're doing, if you're part of the Doge cut or whatever, don't waste much time sitting at home crying about it. When I was younger, I didn't diversify. So I was just radio. So I would lose a job, get fired, get bumped, and I would sit waiting for the next gig, tapes, and then blah, 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 blah. Sometimes I'd sit for 6 months. Then later on, John Hendrick called me and said, get over here and sell cars for a while. Something breaks, you can go back in the radio business. I'll take care of you. John and Rick Hendrick, wonderful people.
Wow.
Wonderful people. Then I started my own car company. Then I started doing voice work. So I would lose a gig in radio, and I had a couple other things, side jobs, that could keep me going. Diversify yourself if you're doing anything. Get yourself, no matter what you're doing, I don't care if you're in radio or whatever, diversify yourself, learn to do something else. We all have many talents. I think the man gives us one good one, but I think he gives us all many talents. And so diversify yourself no matter what you're doing. I've worked in the heating and air business. You can make a living selling heating. You can make $100,000 selling heating and air units if you know what you're doing. And it's not that if Chuck can do it, believe me, you can do it.
I don't believe that. I believe you are just one of those people who can talk to anybody, anywhere about anything.
No, I don't think so. You have to have some knowledge to be able to do that if you study up on it and stuff like that. But I like people. I like talking to people. I like finding out about people. I like to talk on the phone. I'm a talker. I like to talk to people.
And when can people hear you on the air?
Well, I'm up at WHKY out of Hickory. So they built me a studio in Rock Hill. So it's about 15 miles from my house. And I go over there. It's about every day from 9 to noon. But I'm on WHKY. That's 1290 AM, 102.3 FM, or from anywhere at WHKY.com. You can stream it everywhere. It's a 50,000 watt stick. It's a conservative talk radio station. We have Hannity in the afternoons, Hal Rowe in the mornings, Chuck Boozer middays, and Clay and Buck from noon to 3. They took Rush's place on the EIB network.
So if a mom came to you and said, my son is manic.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to her? Where would you tell her? Where would you tell dad to go for help?
I had a lady come up to me after I spoke one time about this, and she said, you have described my son-in-law to a T. And she said, I need some help. And I gave her some doctors. And I would say, get him to see somebody and go with somebody. And Lindy and I were walking down at the Arboretum one day about 2 years after I spoke. We were walking down there by Birds Unlimited, right by that store.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy came out of the store and came up and said, are you Chuck Boozer? I'm walking with Lindy on the sidewalk. We got a bag. And I said, yeah. And he said, you spoke to my mother-in-law about 2 years ago, and she told you that I was having some problems. He said, I've gotten some help. I want to shake your hand and tell you thanks for talking to my mother-in-law. And I said, God bless you, brother. And Lindy said, who is that? And I said, that was a home run. That was the success story.
You are a success story.
That's what that was about. Well, for John to say that he didn't think I should lead with this, I know where John was coming from. He didn't want to put that out front. The reason I share my experiences is I think anybody who's going through it, stay with it. It's going to swing back the other way. If it's swinging this way, hang on, it's going to swing back the other way. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Hang with it. You're going to be okay. Trust me. If I made it, and there were times, y'all, where the days were long, I think we all think about maybe taking our lives or killing ourselves.
I don't think so.
I think we do.
You think everybody?
I think we all have those thoughts at one time or another.
You believe everybody at some point has a thought
I don't think
of
that's
ending their
maybe
life.
not everybody, but I don't think it's unusual for somebody to say, I've thought about killing myself. Now, the difference there, they say with people who really go through with it, decide on it, boom, they go. The people who are putting the message out, I'm thinking about killing myself next week, they won't help. That's what I think. And so that's my thought too. The reason I tell people this and share my deep experiences and some of the things that happen and stuff in the mental health institution is so that you can go get help. And there's plenty of help out there. There are some wonderful psychiatric drugs. If you have to start taking a drug, it doesn't mean you're going to take it for the rest of your life. It does not mean that. It means it'll help you get over this. In a manic depressive, we all have mood swings like this, our mountains and our hills. And mine are bell curves. So when I'm here, fantastic. Oh my gosh, great. Oh gosh, on top. Whoops, not doing too good. Oh, going down. Oh, bad. Oh, back up again.
Do you think that affected your career?
I don't think it affected my career, but it did affect my career. I do. Nobody ever said, I used to get all the time, are you taking your medication? And that would make me mad as hell. Shut up about that. I'm taking it, okay? So I wasn't allowed to be upset. But I felt that I was carrying the weight of the station, being the morning guy, and I was having some mental struggles. Nobody ever said, he's manic depressive. And I had some situations where I became a maintenance problem. I had bosses tell me, that they were thinking about hiring me, but they heard that I'm a maintenance problem, that I would throw things or I would get upset. And I said, you're right, I am. And I said, and I also have a problem when people come in my room and want to tell me what to do. And it's the Chuck Boozer show. It's not the Bob Thompson show. It's the Chuck Boozer show. It's Boozer in the morning. But I had people that came in the room that wanted to tell me how to do it. That didn't sit well with me. I knew what I was doing in the room. I knew how to make that room hum. I knew how to get people to listen to me on the radio. I knew, and with the help of everybody, we knew how to put the team together. When Gary Bropes hired Karen Barnes out of Raleigh, we sat around the table and he said, everything feeds back into Chuck. He said, so we're on a round table, and he said, everything feeds back into Chuck. So if you've got something, feed it back into Chuck, and Chuck will take it and do something with it. He is the focus, and that's what we do here. He goes with everything. That's the way
took that responsibility very seriously.
I took it damn seriously. That's what it was. I was the leader of the room. I wasn't afraid to make the calls. What are we going to do? Here's what we're going to do. I'm not afraid to make that call. I don't want to be the boss, though. I don't want to be the program director. I don't want to be in charge of anybody but Chuck. But I do know this about Chuck at 70, that I know how to run that room. I can make that room hop. If you'll listen to me, I can make it go. I can perform at a pretty good level. I don't know if I could do Chicago or New York or whatever. I'm pretty happy being in Hickory, North Carolina.
And I know Hickory's happy to have you.
I hope so. I'm
WHKY.
Yep.
You can stream it at WHKY.com. Chuck, thank you so much.
Well, thanks for asking me. This is so nice of you, sweetie. You're such a good broadcaster, Ramona. You know that. I'd work with you in a heartbeat.
Oh,
I would work with you. You're a sweet girl.
Well, I'm glad you did. This is us.
I guess it is, isn't it? Yes, it is, kind of. Yeah. So thanks for inviting me. It's really nice.
If someone in your family is experiencing a mental health crisis, there's a number you can call, which is 988. And Chuck said something very important. Those people who say, I'm going to kill myself, are people who want help. Yes. So if you do feel that way, it is important to let someone know. 988 is the number you can call for you to get started on feeling hopeful again. Thanks for sharing hope with me. If you'd like to connect, go to RamonaHolloway.com. You can find me on my socials. Once again, Ramona Holloway. And if you'd like to support this podcast, guess what? RamonaHolloway.com.
QueenCityPodcastNetwork.com.